Hello and a very warm welcome on behalf of Autocar Professional to this very special and exclusive panel discussion with industry leaders on the highlights of the Union Budget 2021, which will have a bearing also on the automotive industry. So a warm welcome to Mr. Sandeep Singh, Managing Director of Tata Hitachi, Mr. Anuj Katoria, COO, MNHCV at Ashok Leland, Mr. Tarun Garg, Director, Sales, Marketing and Service at Hyundai Motor India, and Mr. Deepak Jain, President, ACMA. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for sparing your time and participating in this very special panel discussion on Budget Day. We are expecting Mr. Shashank Srivastava also, but I guess he's got delayed. But nonetheless, let's start away with Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh, a lot of allocation, budget allocation for infrastructure development. That must be music to your ears, right?
Yeah, very good. We are very happy. In fact, we have been going through tough times for last one and a half year. Even post pre-pandemic, the industry was not doing too well. And it's a very good news that government is allocating more and more funds. In fact, last few months, we have seen good traction in our industry, construction equipment, mainly driven by the road sector, road, railway, and mining. And we can see now that government is continuing with that. In fact, some of the main issues, which was availability of finance and funding, they are going to handle that with the formation of development financial institution, where they are talking about infusion of capital of 20,000 crore and next 3 years funding of project to the tune of 5 lakh crore. I think all this is a good news for us, and it will certainly help the industry.
Right, right. And that would be good news for you as well, right, Mr. Katoria? And along with that, I think the scrappage policy must be an extremely welcome news from your perspective. Tell us how much of a impact in terms of scale could it have on the commercial vehicle industry? I'm talking about the scrappage policy. Yes, we are yet to know the details, but generally speaking, approximately what could be the scale of impact?
Good evening to all the viewers, and good evening, Sumantra. First, let me talk a little about the infra. You know, the infra, we talked about the national infrastructure pipeline, and today the finance minister said that now it has been expanded to 7,400 projects have been brought into it. And while, 1.1 lakh crore worth of projects have been completed, but as we know that the outlay is much bigger. We had spoken about 100 lakh crores a year back when it was introduced. So we have started seeing the impact of that. The construction and mining segment, wherein, for the commercial vehicle players like us, the tipper demand has been quite good. Right from Q2 of the current year, it picked up again. Q1, okay, we understood that there were challenges. But Q2, the demand came back. In fact, it has been leading the pack. And Q3 also, we saw robust demand. We expect that this demand will keep on going up, driven both by the road infrastructure. Also, there are several other infrastructure projects, including some of the railways. But so overall, we expect that in the next 3 to 4 years, this would continue to provide the positive impact to the tipper segment. So that's on the infra side, with the number of roads being built. In fact, now it is at around 40 kilometers a day. It is likely to kind of go up from here. So that's good news. On the scrappage policy, while yes, there has been an announcement, it is going to be voluntary in nature rather than mandatory. And for commercial vehicles, it is for vehicles which are more than 15 years of age. Right. Also, there was a mention that vehicles which are, greater than 15 years will have to receive a fitness certificate.
Correct.
So we await further details on this. But the good news is, and the market also has responded positively, is that now there is a formal announcement. So in maybe a shorter frame of time, we will get to know the specifics of the policy. And definitely, this would definitely help the industry. It is, in line with whatever the discussions were. It will generate demand. it will actually put the circular economy in motion.
Correct.
Wherein there would be demand for fresh vehicles.
Right. And there, that would also, the policies, scrappage policy once implemented will also create demand for passenger vehicles, right? Mr. Garg, what is your take on the scrappage announcement made today? And what could be the scale of the impact, potential impact in the PV industry, according to you?
So thank you, Sumantra. Yes, like my fellow panelists said, I think it's a very, very good budget, a very inclusive budget as well. So there are a couple of things which we have to look at. One are, yes, some very directly linked to automobiles, like road infrastructure, scrappage policy, something on rural, which directly impacting the auto industry. And some are because, as you know, ultimately passenger vehicle industry is kind of directly linked to the overall economy, per capita GDP. So I think the overall improvement in the economy, which this budget will bring in, I think we are definitely very excited by that. Mr. Kathuria talked about how the markets have given a thumbs up, which is again some very good news. You talked specifically about the scrappage policy. Yes, we are also awaiting the contours of the policy, but very clearly, I think not only will it boost manufacturing, not only will it lead to more sales of passenger vehicles, but I think increase the overall jobs and really have a very positive effect on the economy. Plus, of course, that issue of pollution, because we all know that these 15 or 20-year-old vehicles, which are probably old technology, would be replaced by the latest technology, less polluting vehicles. I think this is overall good for the country as a whole and for our youth as a whole. So all in all, I think these are some of the things which are really helping us and making us excited to look forward, to times ahead.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Mr. Garg, because the FM has also have plans to put a lot of money in the rural population's hands. So that will also have an impact on the auto industry. I'll come back to you on that. But let me come to Mr. Deepak Jain. Deepak, the Honorable FM also mentioned, I'll quote her, she said that for a $5 trillion US dollar economy, our manufacturing sector has to grow in double digits on a sustained basis. Our manufacturing companies need to become an integral part of global supply chains, possess core competence, and cutting edge technology. So this, along with the enhancement of custom duty on certain components, does it encourage the Indian auto component manufacturers to really leverage this opportunity and live up to expectations? How challenging or how advantageous is this?
First and foremost, Sumantra, and thank you for giving ACMA an opportunity again to be on your platform. And good evening to all my fellow eminent panelists. I think this budget, if I would look at least auto sector and auto ancillaries, actually ticked all the boxes of expectations while getting into the budget. It's a growth-led budget, and especially this focus on infrastructure is not about a year. It will actually have a trickle-down effect for multiple years to come in. And I think for your announcement of FM talking about global supply chains, I think auto ancillary and auto sector is probably a shining example in India for that. And for that, I think she's already recognized us in the 13 sectors where she's actually talked about the PLI scheme on export. And the true thing is that with scale, you would actually get competitiveness. We are still very small in the whole global value chain, less than about 1.5%. However, with the right impetus on PLIs, as well as actually catering to domestic demand, I think we will get scale and competitiveness. And I think one key thing I would also like to highlight is that she did also announce in her pillar on innovation and R&D. I think that's very, very important. I mean, so the allocation on innovation and R&D, because the sector has to also evolve based on the regulations, we'll have to keep on investing. So I think those are all the steps in the right direction to promote competitiveness for the sector, and also recognizing the sector that this can actually have a larger impact on the global value chain.
Right, and as you rightly pointed out, innovation and R&D is one of the 6 pillars on which the Union Budget 2021 is based. And one of the other 5 is physical and financial capital and infrastructure. So, Mr. Singh, I mean, I was just going through the figures, more than 13,000 kilometers length of roads at a cost of 3.3 lakh crores already been awarded. Another 5 under the Bharatmala Pariyojana's project, of which 3,800 kilometers have been constructed. So by March 2022, the government plans to award another 8,500 kilometers and complete an additional 11,000 kilometers of national highway corridors. So, and by the way, as she mentioned, the enhanced outlay of 1,18,101 lakh crores from Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, of which 1,08,230 crores is for capital, is the highest ever. How do you see it translating to the growth of the construction equipment sector? And if you can also, for the benefit of all of us, give a quick snapshot of how is that business segment currently performing, and with these announcements, what could the sector expect?
Yeah, like this is a very good question. For us, road construction is the main demand driver, right? And as Deepak mentioned, that this outlay is not only for a year, it actually gives you a very clear projection for the coming at least 5 years, how the infrastructure is going to be developed. Not only for road, railways, mining and irrigation, you need long gestation period, and that is what we seek from the government, that we are looking for sustainable demand for the industry. And that is how we can plan for more capex and more localization and adopting more advanced technology. So in that context, this budget gives us very, very clear direction. Now, looking at the current scenario, this year, the road construction, because of COVID period of 4 months, had come down. So we are almost at about 70–80% of road construction what we did last year, so which is about 3,800 kilometers. But we are looking at somewhere in this quarter catching up. We are now working at 30 to 35 kilometers a day road construction, which had gone down to 5 to 10 kilometers in the beginning of this financial year. We believe we will be somewhere around 8,000 kilometer road construction in this year, and government say that they have already allocated job for about 13,000, and plus 11,000 more will be done next year. So in any good scenario, we look at road construction of 8 to 10,000 kilometers, which is practically possible with the current resources available. One of the most important resource which I mentioned is required is funding of this project and keeping the cost under control. So therefore, government has come out in today's budget. They talked about monetization of assets. They talked about for road 5,000 crore, and for power projects, and for oil gas pipeline and warehouses. These are all right steps by the government to provide funding for these projects. So water for every home, water pipeline is again a very important project. Urban development, urban Jal Jeevan mission, and urban development, infrastructure development. So overall, I believe the government has now put their act together. We can see a good demand coming up in the next 3 to 5 years' time. So that is something which we were looking at. I hope I'm able to give you some clarification on that.
Indeed, indeed. And Mr. Katoria, coming to you, these announcements made, I mean, these such announcements get made in different budgets. Going by your past experiences, how much of them translate into on-ground implementation? And with announcements made today, correct me if I'm wrong, the trough of the cyclicality of the M&HCV market is nearing an end. So will it kind of advance the drive up to the peak again with these announcements?
Sotra, that's a very good question and a very valid question to that. If you were to go back a few years, if you remember that in FY18 and FY19, the impetus on infra was there, and again led by the road construction. Things were going very well. In fact, for us in the commercial vehicle industry, the demand for tippers was the highest ever. We had seen a total industry volume of somewhere around 80,000 plus tippers annually.
And it was also the record year in terms of overall CV volumes, if I'm not wrong, right?
Right. FY19 was the record year, and it was led by the tipper segment.
Okay.
Now what happened is that in FY20, even before the pandemic, the mobilization of the projects and also the timely payment to the contractors, that got impeded. There were several reasons for that, including the Ireland FS crisis that had happened. So overall, it hit a roadblock somewhere, and then that brought down the demand for the tipper segment. But this time again, it has revived very well, and we hope the key to this would be that how these projects would get funded and the mobilization of the projects, including if there is some land acquisition involved. So if this is seamlessly being done, as we have seen in the recent few months, if the same trend continues, I feel that we are good times are ahead of us, at least for this segment. But we'll have to wait and watch, because there is a certain bandwidth, and we will have to see that how that bandwidth is managed very, very carefully. So overall, the indications are very positive, I should say. But as you rightly said, we'll have to wait and watch.
And also, in terms of, generally speaking, apart from the budget announcement, generally speaking, how long a distance do you think there is before the M&HCV market sees a kind of upward trend and a good turnaround?
See, today we are on the 1st of the month, so we closed the month of January yesterday. So the TIV for January was quite good. I should say it was better than what we saw in December. So month on month, we have seen a growth. But if you compare it with last year, you know that the commercial vehicle industry was, migrating from BS4 to BS6. So naturally, primary sales or wholesales were being managed to kind of clean up the dealer stocks. So if you compare it with last year, it has come back to the same levels. But in my expectation, there are certain challenges in the supply chain for the industry as of now. The input material cost pressures are high. Steel availability is also kind of challenged. But if I keep that aside for the time being, I see that Q4 would be definitely much better than if we compare it with the same quarter last year. But again, if you were to talk about the industry, the peak that the industry has seen in FY19 and Q4 of FY19, those levels are yet to be seen. But having said that, in the coming year, with again the everything being, the budget has been very positive. The expectations of the growth in the GDP is very bullish. So keeping all that in mind, we feel that FY22 again should be a very good year for the industry. And again, quarter to quarter, we will keep on seeing the growth.
Okay. Mr. Singh, M&HCV and the Fortuner M&HCV and construction equipment industry are quite closely linked.
Very similar, very similar.
Yes. Right now, how much of a kind of a deficit is the industry in compared to the previous high?
Yeah, so since first 4 months, April, May, June, July, the business was not so good. I think we are at this moment minus 10% as of December, I would say that. But in Jan, Feb and March, we expect that we will recover, and there could be slight positive in this year. That is what we are seeing, because the first cut figures of Jan are also very good. So that means the industry is continuing to do well. We saw very good months in October, November, and December. If Jan, Feb, and March are in similar pattern, I'm sure we will have small positive, maybe 5% positive over the last year.
Correct. Deepak, let me come to you. Mr. Katuria also mentioned about supply chain challenges. One of the key ones being the semiconductor challenge, availability challenge. How is the component industry kind of working towards addressing these challenges and minimizing the kind of pain for the automotive industry?
So Manthan, there are definitely a few headwinds we see. I mean, say current ones are actually the steep increase in base metals and especially steel and non-availability of steel. That's basically hurting the industry. Second, of course, as you said, semiconductors. Now that's a global trend, right? And I think, I mean, but we have to say that India's basically share on consumption of semiconductors, especially in auto sector, is minuscule compared to primarily the global. And I think that may help because the requirements are not so much, so you can probably actually stock and consolidate, but it'll still take time. And I think Q4, there will be actually some, I would say, headwinds still continuing going forward. There has also been a container shortage, massive container shortage because of the trade imbalance between import and export. And because of that, I think we're still having a massive escalations on the freight costs, especially on the container side. So these are headwinds. We continue to engage very closely with our OEMs, especially our members who are into the semiconductors or into electronic business. But there is no easy solution out. It will take a few months to actually ease out.
I see. Mr. Katoria, I can see you looking at the watch. I believe you have a meeting at very shortly. So I would just like to thank you very much for sparing your time and participating in this very special panel discussion. So on behalf of Autocar Professional, I would like to thank you very much and best wishes to you and everyone at Ashok Leyland.
Thank you very much. See you. Bye.
And it gives me pleasure to welcome Mr. Shashank Srivastava, Executive Director, Marketing and Sales at Maruti Suzuki. Shashank, welcome to this very special panel discussion on Budget Day.
Thank you.
Great. Let me quickly get your take. I mean, only a few days ago when we were having a panel discussion on taking stock of the automotive industry's performance, we also touched upon the expectation on the scrappage policy. Now that it has been formally announced, yes, the contours are still awaited, but what kind of, obviously given Maruti's scale, Maruti will have the biggest impact, right? And could just take us briefly through what could be the scale of impact in your, say, car park, for example?
Yeah, so Sumantra, first of all, I must say that it's very welcome that the announcement for the scrappage policy has finally come. And as you rightly pointed out, we need to find out the contours and the finer details before we can comment on what that scrappage policy will, how much effective it would be. But the 20-year for the passenger car vehicle, we made a quick estimate. There is a car park of probably about 39 lakh cars. Of course, some of those would already have been sort of condemned, or they would have actually gone out from the road. So we have to, first of all, make that assessment. It's got a great potential, but it all depends on the finer details. Unfortunately, we don't have the finer details at this time. So whether it will be a disincentive sort of thing, or there would be an incentive, of what level, will it be enough for consumers to shift? We really don't know. So it's so difficult to comment on it, except that it's welcome that at least the announcement that the contours will be given shortly by the Finance Ministry has been announced by the Finance Minister. Great.
Tarun-san, the FM has also announced, made few announcements, which will put a lot of, with the intent of putting good amount of more money on the farmers' hands. So that augurs well for, of course, every sector. But from a PV perspective, what kind of impact do you expect in the coming quarters?
Sumantra, if you see, rural has been the backbone of the automobile industry for the last couple of years, and especially post-COVID, as you know, that was the biggest driver. One, because of probably low incidence of coronavirus in the rural areas. And two is, of course, the general, whether it was the monsoon, the crop, I think there was still a much better positive sentiment in the rural areas. Now with this budget outlay, two things have happened. One is, of course, more money in the hands of the farmer, like you said. And secondly, like we talked about, the road infrastructure, which means better connectivity. So I think all in all, it definitely augurs very well. And we can look forward to an increased contribution from the rural areas. As far as Hyundai is concerned, the way we see it, yes, about 17 to 18% of our sales comes from rural areas. So we have taken a lot of initiatives in terms of providing customers much better, not only sales, but also service facilities in these areas. So now it's up to us to really leverage this opportunity going forward. And as we have been seeing already, positive offshoots have been witnessed in the passenger vehicle industry, whether it was in the last 2 quarters when we had a double-digit growth. Today, in fact, all of us have announced our January results. When I look at Hyundai, we have managed a growth of 24% in the domestic sales. Overall industry also, it appears, should be close to 15%. So I think all in all, there is a lot of positivity going into calendar year 21. And this increased trust by the government in terms of whether it is infrastructure, rural, and like I said, appears to be a very inclusive budget. So all in all, it should help the overall economy and per capita GDP as well, and should be good for the overall automobile sector.
Right. And also, Shashank-san, the FM mentioned about the MSP, and which is, as she said, at least 1.5 times the cost of production across all commodities. So Maruti already had a good presence in the rural markets. Any new initiatives that are in the pipeline? You may not have devised any new one right after the announcement, but anything in the pipeline which will really leverage this announcement impact, which may kick in the coming quarters?
Yeah, so I think very rightly pointed out by Tarun just a few moments ago that rural bounce back has been much better post this pandemic. When the economy started opening up again after the pandemic lockdown. The quarter 2 saw actually very positive bounce back from, and a couple of reasons, of course, 9% increase in monsoon, 6% increase in the Kharif sowing. In fact, the Rabi sowing, which is going on currently, is also 4-5% up. Record Rabi crop of 150 million tons last year. The MSP going up obviously puts in a lot of money into the hands of the agriculture. For Maruti, we have about 40% of the sale in the rural areas. It was 38%. Even in January, the current results show that there is a differential in the growth rates between the rural areas and the urban areas still. So while the urban has started coming up from Q3 and also in April, in January, the gap is still there in the growth rates, positively inclined towards the rural area. So that's very positive. The other thing, which I think it was not explicitly mentioned, but I think it was implied, that there has been a lot of expenditure which has been planned by the government in the infrastructure segment. Now, infrastructure segment is actually one of those areas which is an employment as well as an income multiplier. And that is what we require at this time, because we require something. Government has a fiscal constraint, obviously, because they can't really increase taxes or both on the corporation or on the individual, and they haven't. On the other side, when we talk about the cess, the agri cess on the fuel, which also the minister has clarified that it will only be adjusted against the basic excise duty on the fuel. So there is a constraint on additional revenues. And in light of that, I think the budget does very well. You could see the fiscal deficit going up. 6.6 is, I think, what the projection was, and for current year, almost close to 10%. So I think under the current circumstances, both on the rural front as well as on the infrastructure expenditure side, this is going to be positive for the industry.
Well, a little while ago, Deepak, where you also touched upon one of the 6 pillars of the FM's budget speech, which is innovation and R&D. Now that she has, by making it one of the pillars of the union budget, she has highlighted its importance all the more. How do you think the auto ancillary industry, and also in the backdrop of the hike in custom duties, which will maybe make it not so viable to import anymore, with these 2 developments, do you see the industry players really leveraging these both these developments and really growing faster than expected?
I think, Sumantran, the direction of the government is, the intent of the government is very clear for the industry, is to make the manufacturing sector more and more Atmanirbhar, right? And I think these are, again, announcements where, while engaging with the industry, we had been talking about how they can facilitate more innovation and R&D within the ecosystem. Now, if you see, there is also a lot of announcements on startups. And I think startups, innovation, and R&D, they have to be seen all together with a 50,000 crore outlay. I think this would definitely help to invest in the R&D. Also, I think for the auto ancillaries, largely we are MSME, and I think we are very encouraged to say that the MSME sector outlay has been doubled as compared to last year. So I think that's will also give a boost to those. And I think if you look at the custom duty, and you see the kind of components, because they're selective components. She's not done it ad hoc, across. She's done it on selected components. Again, the spirit is that if there is manufacturing already in India, which is world-class manufacturing, having high quality and competitive prices, why do we need to import them? And I think that's where I think the intent is coming, that please make use of more domestic manufacturing. And in wherever areas she has not really put up duties, where we lack the ecosystem here. And I think with this right innovations, R&D, hopefully we'll be able to develop and invest in that right direction.
Correct. And thereby be more self-sufficient or self-reliant.
More competitive. I think that's more the
competitive. Correct. Mr. Singh, with the focus on with the PLIs and intended to really enhance India's manufacturing capacity and also grow as an export hub. At Tata Hitachi, how do you see this? Is there more plans to really, climb up the technology curve, or maybe tap India stronger as a manufacturing base and perhaps as an export base also?
Yeah, so one that we are working on expanding a product range, meeting the domestic requirement as we see that, the industry is going to improve, expand. So we are bringing in more products in mini excavators and heavy line excavator segment. The second is the mining segment. The mining segment, again, being privatized. So there is a good requirement coming up from mining sector as well. So we are not only expanding our range, but bringing in new technology in these segments. So therefore, the focus is on expanding the product range, bringing in advanced technology. And the third question, what you're talking about is export. Certainly export, we are putting huge amount of focus on exporting our equipment to Middle East and African countries. But we are also working on mining machine to be exported to Africa, Indonesia, and in other parts of the world. So that decision is on the anvil. I think very soon we are going to get one or two very big projects to India so that we can start exporting mining equipments to other parts of the world. So overall, I think we are on an expansion. We are working on increasing our capex in the coming years to expand our production base.
Great. That's good to know that you have got new plans to expand your portfolio as well as all set to back new projects. Tarun-san, one expectation which was there but wasn't quite met by the FM speech was any announcement related to EVs, which by the way is also one of the questions from one of the attendees here. So were you expecting, and because with that being missing, does it also kind of, have an impact on the EV rollout plan of players in India?
Look, Samantra, the way we see it, the direction towards cleaner mobility has been made very, very clearly. I think at various forums, various ministers have really, informed about the commitment, towards EVs. So I don't see, frankly speaking, there was any specific expectation in the budget on that. I think the schemes are already in place. And as far as Hyundai is concerned, we are very confident going forward about our plans for EVs. Today, another exciting thing was also about hydrogen. Yes. I think there are a lot of positive offshoots which inform about the general direction of the government, I think. And so we have no doubts about it, and we are there with the government basically to move towards this cleaner mobility. So we are quite happy with the way things are. And I think more and more state governments are now joining, and in terms of giving relaxations on the road tax, so in addition to the benefits in the FAME scheme as well. So like I said, a strong step in the direction has already been taken. And now it's up to us to really move with the government and make sure that this transformation towards EVs is as smooth as possible.
Talking about EVs, if I may ask, Tarun, you've just closed January. How was the sales performance of the Hyundai EVs?
So, Sumantra, as you know, that today we are in a niche segment, because of the cost of the battery, and of course the duties. So that is the whole idea, that that today we are in the niche segment. But our take on this is that somebody has to take a lead, and that is what we have done. That we create a desire in the mind of the customer. Today it is a niche. The volumes will definitely grow. But suppose we keep on waiting for the volumes to come, then who will take the lead? So I think, like I said, in 2019, when we launched the Kona EV, that time a full-fledged EV with a range of 450 kilometers was not even contemplated. So I think we have to look at it much more from that viewpoint rather than the volumes. Volumes will only follow once the technology is there. The cost will come down. There is a government support. And I think we are on the right path. So we are more concerned with that rather than the absolute volumes.
Right. And I think volumes will also come, we'll talk about volumes also once your next project, which was mentioned earlier, which is in the making currently, hits the market, right?
Yes. We have already announced that we are working on mass market EVs, and yes, we will be coming out in the due course with some exciting products in the EV range as well.
Sang-san, the FM also mentioned about tapping the railways for freight transportation and also developing other passenger on the passenger side also. But Maruti Suzuki being one of the players which has really increasingly tapping the railways for vehicle transportation. Could you tell us how do you plan to take it forward from here? Currently, what percentage of your let's say inventory is shipped out of your plants to various places across India through railways?
Yeah, so again, a very welcome step. As I said, the spending of capital nature, and that is always going to give a long-term benefit. At the moment, we are trying to increase the percentage of sale of inventory which we carry through the railways. It's been increasing, and I think it's about 16 or 17% at the moment. It's going up all the time. And for some destination, of course, it's even higher. Especially, we have now stockyards in various areas to try to reduce the dealer inventory times. And those are specific locations. So it's so much easier if you have a specific location and not sending inventory across the country that we do by a truck and trailer with so many FOR codes. So I think it's positive for us. We are looking forward to take advantage of all this. And it's not just the railway infrastructure spending, it's overall, there is a massive correlation between the economic growth and the auto industry fortunes. And I think anything which is growth oriented, as we saw this budget projection of 11-12% for next year, I think it's pretty good. And it depends on how we take our plans from here. And we are very well placed. I think Tarun mentioned how this year has been month on month an improvement. And going forward, we seem to have a healthy pipeline as well. But we must realize that compared with the highs earlier, it's been a little less than optimum. We are still 30% of the previous 2 years, the highs. So yes, this thing will help. And we are looking at our revamping our new strategy for the inventory carrying based on this.
Right. Deepak, the FM also mentioned, if I can quote her, she said that bringing down the logistics cost for our industry is at the core of our strategy to enable Make in India. So from an auto component perspective, industry perspective, that also, I'm sure it is a very, it's a focus area. So what kind of levers are you kind of pulling to reduce logistics costs?
I think clearly, Sumantran, there are certain competitive, if I may use the word, disabilities in India. Labor, land, and logistics, right? Logistics has always been one. And I think as the FM has talked about, the multimodal, say more efficient, basically road transportation, all these would actually help to bring the logistics costs. And the logistics costs are not just domestic. We are talking about if we really want to get into the exports, I think a lot of the supply chains, the inland haulage cost is actually sometimes more than actually shipping it from port to port. So I think we need to really focus on to the logistics cost. And I think these announcements which is made, better infrastructure development, usage of multimodal, so they would all help in actually further reducing. And I think this is what the industry has been looking for, a set direction, right? And all these today announcements were at least all in the right direction. Key would be also execution now.
Right. All announcements in the right direction. Gentlemen, before we leave, we'll take one more last question. Again, we started off on talking about scrappage policy, one of the key highlights of today's budget speech. So one gentleman asked, assuming the scrappage policy turns out to be a positive stimulant to the automotive industry, given the high number of end-of-life vehicles and that are plying on the road, and on the other hand, in India, which meet the mandates put in place. So how are the OEMs planning to address this issue? Shashank-san, starting with you.
I didn't get the question. I think there was some disturbance. You were saying that the question pertains to the fact that how the OEMs will take advantage of the scrappage policy. It's not a very easy thing to, scrap cars. So it has to be done in professional way. There are materials which are used in the car which need to be segregated. There is a specific, method of doing it. It's actually quite technology oriented. It's not like we just give it to a kabaddi and he, puts it off as a scrap. So there are in most advanced countries specific companies which with specific infrastructure for planned scrappage of end-of-life vehicles. And I think that is what we will see going forward in our country as well.
And at Hyundai, Tarun-san, is the company kind of taking any kind of talking to potential partners to ensure that there is enough capacity to scrap the cars once the contours of the scrappage policy are clear and there is maybe a large number of these end-of-life vehicles become candidates to be scrapped?
So Sumantra, without divulging too much about this strategy, what I would say is that we have been talking about this scrappage policy since the COVID struck, and in fact we were expecting it. So yes, we have been interacting with like Shashank mentioned, there are some companies in India who are already there. So yes, so we are in touch with them, and we are just waiting for the contours of the policy, and then accordingly we have to decide, how do we become a part of that ecosystem. But definitely yes, it should be very good for the overall, I think, like I said, well-being of the country. Not only in terms of automobiles, but especially pollution. I think that is something which post-COVID, all of us are very, very conscious about, and getting rid of these, some of these polluting vehicles will be very good, not only for us, but for our future generations. So that is how we are really looking at it much more with a lot of optimism and looking forward to it.
Indeed, and optimism is the word. Optimism is the sentiment which today's FM's speech has also triggered in the industry, and all about putting the direction and putting the visions of the government in place on record. And gentlemen, talking to you, it looks like all of you give a thumbs up to that, and ending this very special panel discussion on a positive note, and with all best wishes from Autocar Professional to all of you, Mr. Sandeep Singh, Mr. Tarun Garg, Mr. Shashank Srivastava, Mr. Deepak Jain, and Mr. Anuj Kathuria, who had to leave early. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for sparing your time, and best wishes to all of you.
Thank you, Sumantra.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tarun, Deepak,
Thank
Sandeep ji.
Thanks to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.